So here we are, lesson 6 of Daniel. And we're looking at chapters 9 and 10 today, mostly chapter 10, with just kind of an overview of 11 and 12. But we're going to be doing a lot more study on 11 and 12. So if you've got lost in chapter 11, don't worry about it. No, I almost wrote all of you to say, don't worry about chapter 11. Just kind of get the big picture of it, because you can really get lost in all of those battles. Okay, so we just try to keep it simple. That's my goal. Keep it simple, but understand what's happening. So here we are, chapter 10 in Daniel. And we're talking about another vision. But let's just kind of walk through what's happening with Daniel in this chapter. And it starts out with verse 1. With verse 1 kind of gives us a summary of 10, 11, and 12. 10, 11, and 12. Okay. Because it says, in the 3rd year of Cyrus, king of Persia, remember we're looking at the nations that are in control. This is during the time of the Medes and Persians. A message was revealed to Daniel, who was named Belteshazzar, and the message was true. And one of what?
Great conflict.
Great conflict. Okay, so this is why Daniel is struggling so much, because this is one of great conflict. But he understood the message and had an understanding of the vision. All right, so when you looked at all 3 chapters, 10, 11, and 12, did you see the connection between the 3 of them? How does 11 and 12 connect to chapter 10? Or does it?
Doesn't 11 and 12 explain the vision, and that's the man in the linen cloth talking?
Right. So chapter 10 is when he sees the man in the linen cloth, but chapter 11 is actually when the man starts to describe the vision and explain to him the vision. Okay, so 10, 11, and 12 go together. So that's why we're going to be dealing with them all as a unit. All right. Thank you, Mark. So let's look at verses 2 and 3. And what do you see is Daniel's situation in verses 2 and 3? What do you see about him? What's happening?
He'd been mourning and fasting.
Right. How long?
3 weeks.
3 weeks. 3 weeks. Why do you suppose he's mourning and fasting? What did we say about in verse 1?
Oh, he understood the vision. So okay, I see.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So he's got this vision of this great conflict. So we see him now mourning and fasting and trying to understand it all. This is during the reign of Cyrus. So where are the people of Israel? Anybody know?
In Babylon.
Yeah, aren't they still in Babylon?
Some of them
But-
are, and some of them have returned to Jerusalem.
Mm-hmm. Right. So they are no longer in captivity. No longer. The 70 years is over. And Cyrus is the one who allowed them to go back to Jerusalem to build the temple. So this is the time when they're out of captivity and they're all going back to their homeland. Okay. So we see Daniel mourning and just in anguish. over what he is seeing and what he's trying to process. So let's just move on and see what, in verses 4 through 10, what do we see about this man in linen? What is Daniel seeing? Who is Daniel seeing? How is he described?
Well, in 5 and 6, he was dressed in linen. His waist was girded with a belt of pure gold of Uphaz, whatever. His body was like beryl. His face had the appearance of lightning. His eyes were like flaming torches. His arms and feet like the gleam of polished bronze, and the sound of his words like the sound of a tumult.
What do you think about that? What if you were Daniel standing there and you saw this and you're trying to describe what you're seeing? And what would your response be? What was his response?
He had great dread.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's a scary picture.
I thought it was interesting that he said in verse 8, his radiant appearance was fearfully changed. Mhm. And he had no strength, so I just picture somebody just weak with fear and trembling.
Right. Right. And of course, he's already been fasting for 3 weeks.
True,
So physically, right.
yeah.
Yeah.
And in verse 9, his words put Daniel to sleep.
Have you ever had that happen? Somebody's talking to you and you fall asleep? Yeah. Yeah.
Somehow
Do
I
you think
don't
he
think
like,
it's for the
do you
same
think
reason.
he, or
What
he
was that, Mark?
fainted?
Somehow I think it's not for the same reason that I fall asleep when I talk to people.
Right. I think it's not the same reason exactly. Exactly. Right. So what's the situation here with Daniel? He sees this man in linen. Who is this man in linen? Is he human or is he angel?
I think he's angel.
Okay, and why do you think he is?
I don't know.
I think you're
Because
right.
the way that he's described with his
Mhm.
face like lightning, his eyes were flaming, he's looks like bronze, his words sound like a multitude, so he's had probably
Mhm.
an inhuman type of voice or sound.
Mhm. Yeah, so he's definitely not a normal human being, right? From this description. And so we're going to see a little bit more about that as we dig into this chapter some more that will verify exactly what you're saying, Blythe. And who else saw this besides Daniel?
Nobody. The others heard it, but they didn't see anything.
Hmm.
This is
So they
while
ran away.
They felt it. They felt a great dread.
yeah, I guess they didn't even hear it. They just felt the great dread
Mhm.
and took off.
So it was definitely something different, something unique, something that they didn't understand and they scared them and they left. So this is not just a man came strolling along by the banks of the river, which I forgot to ask you that. He's by the Tigris River, right?
Mhm.
So that's where he's standing,
Yeah.
which is important because we need to know where he is right now, because in chapter 12, you're going to see that he's still there, which ties those chapters together. Okay, so location, always look at location to see what's happening, where it's happening. All right, so he's by the Tigris. So now everybody's left him and he is seeing and hearing this strange phenomenon. not a human, an angel, an angel. And his response is,
To pass out.
yeah, he falls on the ground. Yeah, he falls down. And just kind of in awe and shock, maybe, but he's now on his face. On his face. And then the hand touched him. And it says, and he set me trembling on my hands and knees. So there's what he's seeing on the banks of the river. He's seeing this. This is not, he's asleep and having a vision. He is actually there on the banks of the river and he is seeing this. So now the man in linen says to him in verse 11, what?
Oh, Daniel, man greatly loved. And he says, I have been sent to you.
Okay. So Daniel, he says, so Daniel, man of greatly loved, or man of high esteem. This is not the first time Daniel has been referred to as man of high esteem. Okay. So we want to talk for a minute again about Daniel. We want to keep Daniel in view here because this is his struggles that he is having. This is his visions. This is him as a person, as a human, what he's going through. Okay, and we don't want to forget that. So what do we remember about Daniel? Look on page 42. See, what can we recall about Daniel and why would he be called man of high esteem?
Well, he suffered a lot. He was constantly challenged for his faith was constantly challenged, and yet he always responded firm, never lost his faith. So
He cared a lot about his people because in, what was it, chapter 9, most of that chapter was about the prayer that Daniel prayed, asking God for, confessing the sins of his people and asking for forgiveness.
He always was humble.
Yeah, always was humble. And we see that again here in this whole situation, his humility. What happened to him when he was falsely accused at the lion's den?
He did not defend himself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he never, ever, ever wavered when it came to his belief in God. He just 1000% trusted God, no matter what the consequences were. Daniel was not going to bow to any other God or alter from his beliefs in any way.
he was also a great witness to others. Like he didn't just stand firm privately, he stood firm in front of people, in front of his window, in front of whatever, wherever he was. It was a good witness to non-believers and believers, I imagine.
Yeah, great point. Anything else about Daniel that would attribute these people, this angel calling him a man of high esteem?
Well, he was given some earthly successes in his life. He was given a lot of authority over things, and he he wasn't just a measly, humble servant. He was esteemed in this Babylonian society and as well.
Right. His integrity, and again, his integrity in a land of captivity. And what was his attitude towards those who were his captors?
He still showed respect for them.
Right. He served them with respect and humility. Yeah, and we saw some of how they felt about him when he was thrown into the lion's den, and who was the king then that was pleading for him? It's like, Daniel, your God will protect you, and running to the lion's den the next morning to see if he was still alive. Yeah, very highly respected, even in a land that was not his own, not his people, an advocate for his people. A man of high esteem. Lots of lessons that we have talked about over these weeks about what we can learn from Daniel. So, man of high esteem. Okay, so let's look at now this man in linen is speaking to Daniel and gets him up on his feet. And he says, understand the words that I'm about to tell you and stand upright. Stand upright, for now I have been sent to you. And Daniel stands up, ready to listen. So what do we see about Daniel in verse 12?
His words were heard.
When?
When he
When-
prayed,
Yeah, when he set his heart on understanding and humbling himself.
It says, from the first day that you set your heart on understanding and on humbling yourself before God, that's when your words were heard. So Daniel has been fasting for 3 weeks. But on the first day that you set your heart to understand this, your words were heard. However, this is the interesting part here, 13 through 21. What do we have happening? What's the explanation about why it took so long to get to Daniel with an answer?
oh, I just noticed that it said that the prince of the kingdom of Persia withstood me. This is the guy in linen talking,
Mhm,
right? For
mhm,
21
right.
days. That's 3 weeks.
Right.
Huh.
Huh. So how does that tie into from the first day that you set your heart?
Opposition.
Yeah. So he started praying, and that first day his prayers were heard, but how long did it take for the answer, and why? What was going on? The prince of the kingdom of Persia was withstanding me for 21 days.
There was a spiritual battle going on between the angels.
Absolutely. So, because who would be the prince of the kingdom of Persia?
Satan.
Satan and his angels. Okay, so what we're seeing here is a battle between God's angels and Satan's angels. So when you have a prince of the kingdom of Persia, is that the king of Persia? No. Who's the king of Persia?
Cyrus.
Cyrus. Cyrus is the king. These princes are angelic beings. So what we're seeing here is a spiritual warfare that was happening for 21 days, where Satan's angels was trying to keep this messenger from getting to Daniel. Hmm. Okay, any, all these hms, like when you pray, do you always get an answer right away? And what might be the reason? Yeah,
Spiritual battle.
yeah, it's a spiritual battle, right? Paul talks about that in Ephesians about our battle is not against flesh and blood, right? But against
The powers.
yeah, the spiritual forces in heavenly places. I'm not quoting it exactly, but there's this spiritual battle going on, and we're going to talk about this. Next week's lesson is all about this spiritual battle, but you can see it happening here. And how did this man in linen eventually get free to come to Daniel?
Michael, the angel Michael came to help.
Okay, so the angel Michael came to help the man in linen to fight off the prince of the kingdom of Persia. What do we know about Michael? The angel Michael. You might have some notes on page 41 of your homework.
He's described as the great prince who has charge of your people.
Okay, of whose people?
Daniel's people.
Daniel's people,
Israelites,
right?
yeah.
Yeah, the Israelites.
Mhm.
Anything else you saw about Michael in our studies?
Well, I wrote down under Michael on page 39, I wrote down, but I forgot to write the verse, but I wrote at that time shall arise. But I'm trying to find that reference.
Yeah, but yeah, and this is talking about the end times, and it might be in
It might be later.
in 11 or 12.
Chapter 12, verse 1, I think, Blythe.
Oh,
Yeah, it stands guard over the sons of your
Right.
people.
Right.
Michael, yeah,
Arise.
the great prince who, yeah,
Mhm.
that's where I got it.
Yeah. Yeah, you got it. So that will be happening at the end times, Michael, when things are all going crazy, Michael will arise to help. He is your guardian angel. He is Israel's guardian angel.
Hmm.
We saw Michael in Revelation when we were looking at Revelation 12 and 13. There was a battle and Michael was fighting and he won. Right? Michael wins. Yeah. So we have this man in linen who's an angel, and we have Michael who's helping the man in linen fight against the Satan's prince of Persia in order for the man in linen to get to Daniel with the message. Definitely a spiritual warfare. And it took 3 weeks. 3 weeks. What else do we see about this account with Persia and Michael and Daniel and the man in linen? What does he say he's come to do in verse 14?
To tell him about what's going to happen in the latter days, the days
Okay,
yet to come.
Yeah, this is future, the latter days. What's going to happen again to your people? To your people. Remember that right now, Daniel, it's about the nation of Israel. It's all about the nation of Israel. God is dealing with the nation of Israel here. It was the nation of Israel that came out of Egypt. It was the nation of Israel that moved into the promised land. It was the nation of Israel that disobeyed God and was taken captive into Babylon. It's the nation of Israel that is returning to Jerusalem. Okay. And it's the nation of Israel that he's talking about here. of what will happen to your people as a people in the future. Okay? So this is for the future. And in Daniel, what is his response? What is his response?
He's
Week
speechless.
13, it says he's speechless.
He's speechless. Okay. So just think, you have to try to put yourself in Daniel's place. And, and think, you've been fasting, praying about this vision that you've seen. It's a great conflict, and you are crying out for your people, and you don't understand this, and you want to know what's going on. And then this man in linen shows up, and he's like nothing you've ever seen before, which is kind of confusing. And he falls on his face, and then the man gets him up and says, I've been held up for 3 weeks trying to get to you. And this whole angelic spiritual battle that he's now hearing about, trying to process all that. And then he's just like speechless. I don't, just think about that. All that he is seeing and hearing and going through, and he's already so distraught because of what he knows is going to happen to his people who are now back in Jerusalem. So thinking that they're back in their home country and their life is going to be wonderful again, and it's all going to be good. Well, this is going to say to Daniel, no, it's not going to be good until the Prince of Peace comes. Okay? Right? So that's Daniel, the man. Think about if you were him, hearing all of this and seeing all of this and it breaking your heart. And now he's speechless. So what happens to him next?
Someone touched his lips.
Because he's speechless, right?
Mhm.
And what is Daniel's, look at Daniel's response. Look at his attitude. Look at his demeanor. Look at 16. When he's able to talk to this person, what's he describing?
He's in great anguish over the vision.
Mm-hmm.
And as a result, it's sapped all his strength. I have retained no strength.
Think about that. Have you ever been in a life situation where you were in such anguish? And what did that do to you? I'm sure like sometimes you just don't even want to get out of bed because it's so hard emotionally. So hard.
And it was
And
also,
this is Dan.
it's also kind of a reverence. It says, how can such a servant of my Lord talk with such as my Lord? It was almost like not so much anguish, it's just in awe of being in his presence was just
Right.
beyond
Right.
what you can imagine or think about.
But you could see the people he was with couldn't see or hear him, but still felt something and ran and hid. Daniel is seeing and hearing and feeling something,
Right.
and still able to stay at least.
Yeah. I'm sure he kind of felt like, am I even allowed to say anything to you? Like Nancy was saying, it's like this reverence for this being. It's like, I can't talk to you. I can't. Right. But his lips were unsealed, so of course, that's a sign, yeah, you can talk to me. And he expresses that anguish and how he has no strength.
Is this person that's touching his lips and touching him and strengthening him, is that still the guy in the linen?
Good question.
I think so. I think so.
Carla thinks so.
Well, because he says later, I have to go back and fight the Persia guy again. And Michael's gonna come help me because I gotta go back to the battle. So here's everything I'm gonna tell you, but now I have to get back and fight some more. So I thought, oh, it must be the same guy.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah.
It's interesting.
That's my guess. That's just a guess, but
Interesting that it refers to, I don't know if it is the same man every time, because I wondered the same thing, because in verse 16, it says one in the likeness of the children of man.
Yeah.
Verse 18 says one having the appearance of a man. And then, like we said earlier, it's just talking about a man in linen. So I'm hoping our future lessons might explain all that to us.
Or Carla will.
no,
Yeah.
no, I'm just guessing. I'm guessing.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
And
throw
Go
any
ahead.
other, I'm going to. I was reading a commentary and it was talking that the beginning part, the man in linen, could be Christ. And then when it says a hand touched me, that is a different, like, but could be not necessarily because we don't actually know. But that the man in linen
Right.
is Christ, and then it's later when the one that's fighting with Michael against the Prince of Persia is an angel.
If it was Christ, he wouldn't need Michael. That's what I was thinking.
No, yes, but so like again, just another theory. That the guy that's in, what is that? 5 through 9 is a vision of Christ, and then in 10, the hand that touches him to give him strength is an angel. Perhaps Gabriel.
But he
That's
also calls him my Lord twice. It's not capitalized, but he does.
Right. Yeah, and let me look at where the man in linen says, for you're saying in verse 10, it becomes a different person. So
it's just something I read.
right, I know there's two thoughts.
Yeah.
There are two thoughts. And one is that it was a vision of Christ, and the other one against that is that he would not need help from Michael. He would not be stopped by the angel of who is going against him. He would not be by the Prince of Persia. Jesus would not need anyone to help him with that because he's more powerful. So there's the question. And one of the things like chapter 12, in chapter 12, the man is still talking. Okay, I'm trying to find this.
Verse 6 says, and someone said to the man clothed in linen. I was wondering who that someone is.
Yeah. So the man in linen is the one who is talking, starting with 11, verse 2. He starts to explain all of this. Okay. And in 12, he says, now at that time, Michael, the prince who stands guard, will arise. So it's not Michael talking. It's the man in linen talking. So you have to try to follow the pronouns all the way through. Because some people say it was Michael talking, giving this vision, but I'm like, I don't think that's because it says here, at that time, Michael will arise. So. Yeah, so whatever, it was a very powerful vision, and and a lot of commentaries think it was Gabriel, because Gabriel had appeared to Daniel previously in chapter 9 and in another chapter, maybe 8. So Gabriel was there to explain the vision. Gabriel was the one who was explaining the vision of the 70th week. So this could be Gabriel, yeah, it could be, if Courtney's theory is correct, then it would be Jesus was the vision that he saw, but then Gabriel was there as well, touched him. I don't know, because the man in linen is saying, I have to go back and fight, but I'm going to tell you what this is. So we don't want to get caught up in that at the moment. What we know is there's a superhuman character here in the man in linen, and we know that there's a spiritual battle going on between Satan's angels and God's angels. Okay. Right? So the question then remains in our head. And so we're going to just try to follow that as we go through these next few lessons and see if you have any better understanding about who that is. Okay. Deal?
Deal.
Deal. Okay. All right. So now where were we?
Verse 19
Yeah.
and 20.
Yeah. And he said, okay, this one with human appearance touched me again and strengthened me, and he said, "O man of high esteem." So if it's a different person, everybody's calling Daniel, "Oh man of high esteem." Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. Why not?
Well, Daniel says to him that you have strengthened me.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. Don't be afraid of all of this. And then he says, "Do you understand why I came to you? Do you understand why I came to you? I will now return to fight against the Prince of Persia. So I'm going forth, and behold, what's going to happen then?
Prince of Greece will come.
Ah, now what are you thinking?
Greece.
The kingdom.
Thinking of Alexander the Great, but
Yeah, the next empire, or the
The
next
next,
uh, level
Right.
king. Yeah.
right,
Well, since
all the way back
Christ-
to the statue of Nebuchadnezzar in chapter 2. So it's all just playing itself out here. So now we see for sure the next kingdom coming in is Greece.
But when we
Right.
talked about the Persian prince, it wasn't human, it was spiritual. Since it's saying the prince of Greece, is that also spiritual or is that
It is.
human?
Yeah,
could
it
be
is.
both.
Right. Because you're talking about, I'm going to go back and fight against the Prince of Persia. And when I do, the Prince of Greece is about to come. So there's going to be more battles. Okay. Which was in the beginning, Daniel's like, it's about a great conflict. It's conflicts. But then he says, however, so he says, I have to go keep fighting the Prince of Persia. However, what am I going to do?
You're talking about 21 there, where I will tell you what's
Yeah.
inscribed in the writing of truth.
Yeah, I will tell you. So I have to go back and fight, but before I do, I'm going to tell you what's going to happen. Yet there's no one who stands firmly with me against these forces, except who?
Michael, your prince.
Michael, your prince, okay? So definitely spiritual beings here, definitely spiritual warfare, definitely. Which is what we will look at in next week's lesson. But what do we see? How does Daniel 11 and 12 tie into this? If you look at chapter 11, just at the very beginning of it,
Well, that's in verse 2, 3 more kings are going to arise in Persia, and then a fourth will gain far more riches than all of them. So, which kind of reminds me of the 4 horns.
mm-hmm. Right, so all of this is tying into those visuals, previous visions. But, you know, he says, and now I will tell you the truth. And then he starts explaining all of this. What is going to happen to Daniel's people during the kingdoms of the Medes and Persians, and during the kingdom of Greece and Rome, and the end, all the way to the end times, to the 70th week, and all the way to the millennial kingdom. So that 11 and 12 takes us all the way through there with details about these battles, about the wars, and how it's all going to happen. Anything that stood out to you in chapter 11, just in general?
Just that I would have to, you almost have to go back and study the history, world history in those times to see how that'll, to get all the details of this, because if you read some of the commentaries, they'll actually go into great detail on this, but there's no way to retain all that. There's so much, he's covered so much ground in 11. Because you got all these different kingdoms, and but somewhere I read, somebody's even predicting, this king's going to give his daughter to this king, and they kind of form a pact,
an alliance.
But then that doesn't work out the way they, it's remarkable the details. That's why some people think that Daniel was written after all this had taken place, because it's just too accurate.
Right. And this is when sometimes I wish I were a historian, but because you need to be able to put history together with prophecy to see how it all plays out and the truth of it all. And so fortunately, there are historians that have researched all of this, and you can read about how all of this did happen, Alexander the Great, and these battles and the different kingdoms, and how they succeeded in them, were taken over by other kingdoms, and coming from the north and the south, from Egypt and Syria. And the beautiful land is mentioned in there. So, right? So Israel is part of that, of those battles. The beautiful land, which would be Daniel's people. And it's going to take us right to the very end. That is the conclusion of Daniel's vision before, of the 70 years and the 70th week of Daniel that has not yet happened. So we're not going to look at chapters 11 and 12 until I think the lesson 9, but we're going to dig deeper into these 2 chapters and those battles. But what we can know, and what the people of Israel, the Israelites, can know, if they know the book of Daniel, they can know what's coming. They can know how this is all going to end. And the same for us. If we know the book of Daniel, we can know. Again, based on all the prophecy and the fulfillment of all that prophecy, and therefore whatever is yet to be fulfilled will be fulfilled. So we're not unaware, understanding Daniel helps us to understand world history as well as spiritual history, God's kingdom versus the earthly kingdoms. So we can know that. And in the meantime, what we've learned in these chapters and looking at Daniel, is like we've learned from him to have integrity in hard times. Have integrity in hard times. Hard times are coming for Daniel's people all the way to the end. So how do they respond? How do we respond? We have integrity. We've learned from Daniel in chapter 9 how to pray based on the word of God. If you remember chapter 9 and that prayer, what did we see about his prayer? I'm taxing your minds a little bit to think back to last week. But if you remember, he prayed, he went all the way back to Egypt and based his prayer on what God has done already for them. And then he's praying, fervently about the forgiveness of their sins and all that has happened, knowing that the captivity is almost over, realizing that from Jeremiah, about the 70 years. So praying based on God's word. We've learned about living by example. Blythe was talking about that earlier, about he didn't hide it. When the edict went out that they were not to pray to any other God, and Daniel had been praying in his window every day, he just was like, well, I'm just going to keep doing that. And he goes to his window to pray where everybody can see him, which is what those guys were counting on to trick him. But he didn't hide it. He was an example. We've learned who the Most High God is. Anything that comes to your mind about God and what we've learned about him so far in Daniel?
Keeps his promises, for one thing.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And that's even when the promise is a consequence.
Ah, there you go.
Mhm.
The blessings and the curses,
Mhm.
right? And that's why they were in captivity, because he promised the curse for disobedience.
But also God can use whoever he wants, whenever he wants, to fulfill his plan,
Hmm? Yeah.
even people that we don't think he could use.
So taking them to Babylon, which was the enemy, was all about bringing them back to God, right? Bringing them back. It's always about bringing them back to God.
He will also ultimately conquer and have dominion. I wrote, his kingdom will never be destroyed.
Mm-hmm.
And he told us the end of the story.
Right. Right. So right now I'm picturing that rock at the base of that statue in Nebuchadnezzar's statue, his dream in chapter 2. And you see the rock at the bottom that's God's kingdom that will crush all of them and will never be destroyed.
Mhm.
So we know that's what's coming. We don't know when, but we know that's what's coming. Do you have any doubt about it? No.
Nope.
Not when we see all of prophecy fulfilled in detail. All this prophecy that was proclaimed way before it ever happened. So we know that it will, that 70th week of Daniel will happen. And then God's kingdom will come and it will never end. And that's our kingdom. That's where we live. That's where we live. Even now we are in God's kingdom. And so we then have integrity. We live a life of witness. We trust in that God who is the most high God, and we don't have to bend to any other God. Daniel wouldn't, from the very beginning, would not bend to any other God. And because he didn't, he was held in high esteem. His captors saw in Daniel this integrity, this living by example. His captors saw that. And in the end, these angels are saying, oh, Daniel, man of high esteem. Everybody saw that because of his actions. So that's our challenge again. I want to keep going back to Daniel because he's our example. He is our example. So we don't want to get lost in chapter 11. We want to be able to keep our eyes, on what Daniel is doing and what Daniel as that man is seeing and experiencing, and what he is showing us how we can handle it as well. Any other thoughts?
He also gave Daniel some spiritual insight that he might have not had before too. I mean, he didn't have to share the details of what, why he was delayed or where he's going, but he did.
Right. And I think that's probably the biggest point, in this lesson is he was delayed for 21 days. Daniel's praying and his prayer is not answered for 21 days because of the spiritual battle. And I think, that's something we don't always think about. And next week's lesson, we're going to dig into that and just look at other scriptures about this spiritual battle. And good for us to realize, you pray for something and it doesn't seem to get answered, but there's another battle going on up here, a spiritual battle. Okay.
I take notes in my Bible, so I have
Good.
writing all over it.
Mhm.
And I'm not afraid to write in my Bible.
Thank you.
But from Daniel 7 to Daniel, whatever we just finished, I have been very hesitant because I feel like I don't understand. So right
Mhm.
now, Daniel 7 to 10 is just covered in Post-it notes of notes that I've written down and they're see-through, so I can still read. But that being said, I texted my mom. I took a picture, like I folded the pages so that you could just see the plethora of Post-it notes that were on it. Just before we came on here, and I just said, this is what my Daniel looks like right now in my Bible. And I'm finding this study to be so hard and so stretching and challenging. And I just said to her that it feels sometimes like understanding is futile. Like it's just it feels futile. But then I kept coming to the part where it's talking about Daniel being greatly loved. And just like you were saying, like what he just was upstanding, upright, and was diligent in his walk. And even though I feel frustrated and I don't know, somewhat discouraged because this feels hard, I I was just coming back to that, like in the end, that's what I want. I want the Lord to look at me and tell me that I'm greatly loved and that I've done what I can. And so even though this feels hard and there's just post-it notes everywhere, I'm just gonna keep going.
Good. I love that because, okay, now think of Daniel. Did he ever think it was frustrating, discouraging, hard? Did he ever think of that? This is just hard. This is just, yeah, but I'm going to keep going. Yeah.
You know,
Thank you, Courtney.
Daniel was faithful, and yet he's living the consequences of sin in captivity. And that could have been so depressing. He could have been so discouraged by that because he was a faithful man of God. And yet here he is living the consequence along with the rest of the Israel, nation of Israel. And I remember that every time it says, greatly loved and high esteem. He didn't, he could have tried to defend himself over and over again. Why? Asking why am I here? But instead he just worshiped the Lord faithfully for those watching him and for the Lord. And that was a great lesson to me.
Yeah, that's what we have to see. That's the important thing, right? Good. So I might have to get some sticky notes, Courtney. There are some places I have not marked the pronouns, because I'm not sure. So as we go through this, maybe I'll go back and fill in some blanks, but sticky notes is a good way. Thank you. I love how you study it. I just love it. Yeah. Thank you, all of you, for your diligence in this. And we just kind of wrestle things together and try to make sense of it. So next week we're looking at lesson, what, 7? 7. Yeah, 7. And it's about spiritual warfare. So I think you're going to love it on that 21 days delay. All right. So we'll see you all next week in the sunshine, hopefully, for all of you. For all of you.
Yeah. Thank you, Linda.